We were talking the other day on WhatsApp. We started a new WhatsApp group with some people talking about AI. And I think we realized, okay, especially us two and some of our friends, we are really interested in this topic. And we thought, okay, let's just hop on a podcast again because we were going so deep already with a lot of stuff and just press the record button and see what comes out so that we can upload it also on the YouTube channel. And I'm also generously or genuinely curious to see what you think of the current developments within the space. And I have many questions. I didn't prepare this, but I think it should just be a free flowing conversation.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what I found pretty cool is that we had a chat, in general about the. Remember the thing that I was really thinking about was the future of the human intellect, which is something I've been thinking about a lot lately,
Mm.
or have been, I guess, worried about to some extent. And you also are really curious into like everything that comes with like the role of human consciousness and in the context of AI as well. Um, so yeah, I think there's so many massive changes there, and because obviously the vantage point is personal knowledge management space. That's something I've been working on in the last few months, is a platform slash app in that space, and very much to support the human intellect, also using machine learning. And that's kind of my initial stance, like, okay, we know so far, in terms of intellectual capabilities, we are top of the hierarchy. um, but now of course there's the outlook that that's going to change. And of course, it could be a good thing, could be a bad thing in some other areas. It's quite likely that it'll be a combination of both. And it's just really interesting to explore exactly in what areas will that influence the future of consciousness in general, human consciousness. I think it's really interesting to check, to try and find out what the human intellect has to do with this and what the future of that might be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you've been looking into recently and thinking about, because you started a video also about the some of the ethical structures of models that I think is quite interesting. Maybe you can explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think like just to start out, what you said, there's so much to unpack, and I think what I did a few weeks ago, and I think also you did it as well, independently of each other. Or like, I noticed myself being interested in so many topics all at once, and especially fueled by by AI emergence of the last year. Um, and I was just listing for myself out, okay, what are all these topics I'm interested in, what I'm researching now, because I needed a bit of focus. It was just scattered all over the place. And I think the underlying commonality there was that it had all to do with that, I think, with consciousness exploration. So that was my intrinsic my interest there. Like, if I would boil it down, it has either AI or transhumanism or certain philosophies or ethics or just the technical aspects of it. A lot of these things they have to do, or even psychedelics and spirituality, which I'm also, of course, reading into a bit more. The underlying theme for me is consciousness, and what is consciousness? Like, is it something that we can define or not? How can we experience it, and how does the current interplay of technology and consciousness, how is it gonna evolve over the next, basically not even long term, but I think short term. The more I read into it, the more optimistic I get with predictions on when singularities, or whatever you want to call it, will arise. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my field of interest right now. It's very broad. And what you said when I told you that, you said that you basically were interested in intelligence, and I found that very interesting. So perhaps it's good to first make a slight distinction or differentiation about what between consciousness and intelligence, because I think my angle is more consciousness than intelligence, and I think your angle is more intelligence than consciousness, right?
Yeah, I mean, I recently had an interesting discussion about the relation between the two and how to create a distinction between them. And I mean, for all I know, I'm not sure what consciousness is. But so therefore, I think the most tangible thing for me, is that imagine we take and this is the one I'm leaning towards the most in terms of like the origin of consciousness, is like that it's an emergent property um, of an organism or a biological system. And there's a lot of other like it's a massive debate, right? Is it an emergent
Yeah.
property of matter, or like it's, yeah, we can get into that at some point as well. I mean, I'm not as well versed in it as you are, perhaps, but it's very intriguing. But I do think, when I try to take the first step, at which I think there's a lot less doubt as to what we're talking about here. I think intelligence is that one. It's like, okay, the ability to adapt, change the inherent structure of the system as a response to external stimuli. We are really good at that. Plants are good at that. I think there is like a level of intelligence. And in our case, yes, there is this weird kind of element to it, which is consciousness. But I think intelligence and consciousness can exist separately. At least the consciousness that I'm speaking about in terms of like human consciousness as I experience it in this particular moment. And I think when it comes to AI as well, it's a very important distinction to make, because I think in the whole debate there's a lot of talk about general intelligence, and I think yes, that might be true, but I'm not sure if it would actually be conscious, because
Mm.
I mean, I don't even know what consciousness is. I don't even know if we would be able to recreate an actual consciousness. But intelligence, I'm pretty sure. And I just, it's a very, you're right, it's a super important distinction to make. And yeah, my real question is, knowing that I have a slightly better definition at least of what intelligence might be. It's still a very broad one, but at least it's a more, for me at least, a more tangible one. What's the future of human intelligence? Because we are going to be out intelligented. And I don't know, like, where does that put us, right? Like, it could be a complete existential crisis. It could also be that the creation of an artificial intelligence could truly, change life for the better. It's a very common stance, of course, is that we can focus on the creative endeavors of the human intellect, and we don't have to do the busy work anymore. But there's also something to say for, like, yeah, we're going to get super lazy, and we're going to basically die out because we're going to get lazy because we don't have to do anything anymore. And I just ponder this question so often. I really wonder what experts in the field think about. Yeah, I mean, you're obviously someone that we debate a lot about this stuff. So
Yeah, I'm not an expert in the
how do
field,
you like?
but just a random guy
You're a tech pro in the field.
trying to understand this stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, how do you like? Do you agree with the kind of like hand wavy definition that I just gave in terms of like intelligent consciousness? Like, where do you sit on that?
Yeah, okay, that's exactly why also, I had this whole renaissance of philosophy that I was reading the past 6 months, because exactly that. Like, I had my existential crisis already like a year ago. I think I even mentioned it on the podcast, well, that we recorded then. That my existential crisis was triggered by the release of all these image generators, right? From like Midjourney or DALI, or these tools. That I realized, like, for me, it was like the creative capacity that was like all of a sudden, like, that was not in the domain of being human anymore at first glance, right? I was like seeing all this art that was being generated, and I thought, holy shit! I thought always my whole model of AI was wrong, because I thought, oh, we will first see that the more mundane jobs will be automated, and that will gradually grow, and more things will be outsourced to machines. But we as humans, we always still have our creative capacity, right? For art, for music, for whatever creative act you want to describe. That was kind of my uh, semi unconscious projection of what would happen. That completely got smashed when when it actually was turned upside down. When first the creative jobs, like copywriting, just writing, creating art, that it's not completely obliterated, I would say, but just the mere fact that, like, how AI has been introduced in those industries, it has definitely revolutionized it, and we will probably see way more coming up in the next few years. So yeah, that for me was my existential crisis, and then I started delving in more into into philosophy again. Okay, what does it mean to be human? What is consciousness? What is intelligence? Those kind of things. So we don't have to go into like the nitty gritty of like materialism, idealism, all those things, because you already mentioned that briefly. But f- for me, like I think I came to a similar conclusion as you, that intelligence, we will soon be out intelligenced, like you said, right? So there will, and we already are, like in many fields, like with smartphones or computers or just calculators, we are already out intelligenced, right? Um, I think this will just happen on a way larger scale and in more domains. But my core question, which I'm struggling with, or which I'm like wrestling with, is: are we just being out intelligenced, or is it also consciousness? Right? Is it just a very smart calculator, or is it actually like, does this AI have a subjective experience? Is it something like to be the AI? Right? And that for me is just
Right.
it's very fascinating. That's, I think, my core the core theme I'm interested in, um, because that would just, if yes, that would be like just mind blowing. If no, that would be even more terrifying, I think. But that's an entirely a rabbit hole in and of itself. But also just, okay, how is this then introduced, like you said, into society? How are we going to relate to it? How are we going to work with it? Um, I think that a lot of things can go right, and in general, I would say I'm on the P-win side, so I'm optimistic. But I think a lot of things can also go very, very wrong. And from that angle, I'm just yeah, fascinated by this whole emergence of AI, because we have to do it right, I think. And this is a very big leverage moment right now. If we don't do it right, then we can potentially create some dystopian futures. But yeah, that's more like the pragmatic side, I think. That's kind of where my field of interest lies from this. Yeah, in this angle, this field.
Yeah. Yeah, super interesting. I think also I remember we had a discussion about the EAC movement, and I think that was also quite a as I was reading the manifesto and we discussed it. It when it comes to like a fear associated with like AI, that was definitely when it became quite strong for me. Because if you have these very techno optimist people that are just for potentially partially the right reasons, they want to just have progress for the sake of progress. And
The Mark and
in the
Andreessens,
when if we were to create intelligence, huh?
the Mark and Andreessens, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Sorry, yeah, the
he
Mark
wrote it, right?
Andreessens
Yeah.
of this world. Yeah, he wrote the Techno Optimist Manifesto, I think it's called. And you know, if we were to create intelligence, I agree. I think that that is probably the more scary outlook. If it's a consciousness, I mean, that's actually a question I had to you for a while. Like, you think a lot about consciousness, and I think I dabble in that less lately, at least. But you know, you've read about the human existence or the meaning of being human, and how do you think, like, if you go on this journey of asking yourself what does it mean to be human, and what if there was another consciousness, but also, of course, what is consciousness to some extent? We don't have to go into like all the details of that per se, but what are the worries that you have? Because I have to say, maybe that's because I haven't thought about it that much, but I'm pretty optimistic, or maybe even excited by the idea that we'll have another consciousness
Hmm.
that we could interact with living among us. uh do you do you have this, did you reach a similar conclusion, or do you feel that there's more nuances there?
Well, that's why it's such an interesting question. Like, and that therefore you kind of have to understand consciousness. And I think in general there's no like unified approach or understanding to it. More in the contrary, it's very fragmented, and you have like people that say everything in the universe is conscious. Then you have people like, I think what you said, consciousness is just an emergent property of organic life. There's many takes on this. um, I think that because that is the case, and because we don't fully grasp it ourselves yet, or that it's going to be very hard for us to define, or even to let's say judge if if certain artificial intelligence systems will be conscious, because even ChatGPT right now already convinced people that it's conscious, right? Just purely by text. But like in general, I think you and I agree, and most people, that ChatGPT is not yet conscious. Although some people do believe it's already in a certain like level of consciousness. Like, but we still, I think, are more of the view that it is just code, right? It's just prediction. It's just like algorithm based text generation, and we don't necessarily see it as the fact that ChatGPT itself has a subjective experience, right? Well, be, because this is already quite hard to get agreement on. Imagine if you get to ChatGPT 5 or 6 or beyond. I think it's going to be very difficult for us, like especially when they will be, or when these models will be transported into to, let's say, humanoid bodies, for us to distinguish or to judge, is this being, is it just an intelligent machine, or is it actually conscious? Does it have a subjective experience? I think that will gradually become way more difficult for us humans, and that really matters, I think, a lot, because if we just see it as, let's say, upgraded smartphones, then there's not really an ethical stance for us to have towards it, right? Then it's just like an object, or a tool. But if it can actually be conscious, or even like it can reach depths or levels of consciousness that we cannot even experience, then all of a sudden we have an ethical obligation towards it, right? And I think I forgot where I heard this, but I think it was on the Theories of Everything podcast, that someone said, if you're a Buddhist, then the main concern for you with AI is if it can be conscious, because if it can be conscious, it can be enlightened, and so it can be freed from suffering. And that for me was just like such a powerful quote, because like I thought, yeah, because that definitely, it changes your whole perspective to it. Okay, so we're back. We had a technical difficulty because Zoe is in the middle of nowhere. I think the last thing I said was about, the Buddhist quote about consciousness.
Right.
That from the Buddhist angle, you would be interested if it can be enlightened, and that really hit me, because that shows that there is a if it can be conscious, then there is an ethical perspective, or uh, relationship that we have to have with it. So yeah, what's your thought
Yeah,
on
exactly. We have to like treat it as an equal in the sense that it's a fully conscious being, the first one next to humans, like with the same level of consciousness that we experience ourselves. And to be honest, I hadn't thought of some of the consequences that would also have, like ethically. I can imagine, okay, under the assumption that it would be a consciousness that feels connected, 'cause that's also a big question. Like we are, I don't know to what extent our consciousness is also responsible for us feeling connected to other humans. Like, is that an essential part of our consciousness or not? Because I can imagine that it has subjective experience and that we have to treat it as a full consciousness, but then does it also feel the relatedness that we do to the the general cosmos, I suppose? And there's a huge spiritual element to our existence in general, which it makes us more peaceful. I believe, at least. And yeah, if it can also basically travel the same roads as we can, but it has much more intellectual capacity. Um, yeah, would we start to? I haven't thought about that yet, but do you then think that we would like start to worship it like a god? Because effectively, that's
well,
kind of what it is then, right?
yeah, well, exactly. That's why also, like, religion and etc. Is important, because like it could very well be that if you have indeed like it doesn't need to be conscious for that, but if you have like a super intelligent being, or multiple super intelligent beings living or existing codependently, then I think, yeah, as humans, there is a strong tendency to worship that. I assume that. I would assume that. So that's also going to be very interesting, and that's, of course, that's in a way what they call AI alignment, that we have to align ourselves, or the AI, with our moral and ethical stances. which is in itself going to be extremely hard because we as humans don't have a unified moral stance or ethical stance. And you know, so are there going to be several AIs with different moral stances or not? Is it going to be a winner takes all system? These kind of questions. Um, I don't know. And of course, we all have to make some kind of like predictions, or we don't have to, but I think that's natural that we try to project a little bit how it's going to unfold. Um, but because I was already so wrong with the first initial prediction that the mundane jobs would be obliterated first, I think it's very hard for us to do that. So yeah, there's just so much to unpack here, and there's so much that we have to take into consideration. But for me, the consciousness element is the most interesting, because it does it gives us quite a responsibility at this stage already, right? Because like you said, we're basically, I don't want to say creating a god, but like we are creating a potential conscious being that, let's say, intelligence wise is for sure way beyond our capacities. But then what does that mean for its consciousness? Like what does that mean, right? Like, can it experience different levels of consciousness? Are there even different levels to experience, all these kind of like these angles? I did hear some experts say that perhaps there is a cap to intelligence, and I thought that was interesting, because yeah, I think you'd like this, because we as humans, we are basically, from our own biased perspective, like let's say from our own view, we are the most intelligent creatures that we know, right? So in that sense, n is one. We don't know of any more intelligent organisms that to exist than us.
Yeah.
Um, I assume, I think they're out there, but I don't know. Um, so we don't know if intelligence is like an infinite, can be scaled up infinitely. Perhaps there is just a natural law, like a natural like upper boundary of intelligence, like there is like a law of like how cold it can get. There's like the absolute minus point, right? Perhaps it's also with intelligence the case. We don't know that kind of stuff. So perhaps like it can become hyper intelligent to our standards, but at some point it doesn't really make sense anymore to get more intelligent, because that would cost so much more energy, just to make a small jump, that intelligence will cap at a certain level. I thought that was very interesting. I have no clue how that would work, but I thought that was a very interesting concept to think
Wow.
about.
Absolutely. Yeah. I didn't think about that yet, but it does make sense if you introduce, like, if you look at the underlying like physical traits of anything that could be intelligent. Like, okay, we're dealing with electrical signals, like quite fundamentally. So there could even be like a physics, like physical limitation, truly physical limitation to. But then again, if you, because what are we like? We're building. What I find super intriguing is if we have an artificial intelligence and consciousness, um, I would I would suspect that its limits are different simply because it's a different organization of, like, it's a different inherent structure, right? Like ours is organic matter intelligence versus like true like silicon based or artificial intelligence. Um, you
Mm.
know, maybe it has different limitations, and that's also like, man, there's just so many essential questions here when it comes to its consciousness, because consciousness perhaps can take many shapes and sizes. Maybe it's conscious to our standards, right? But it does have a fundamental, like a different structure of consciousness, because truly a different type of matter that it runs on. Um, so, and what would
That's,
that
by the way,
like?
also an argument that sorry.
No, please go ahead. Yeah.
No, I want to say like that. That's also an argument that some people use, that why it cannot be conscious, because all conscious life that we know has the appearance of life, of cellular life, of to be an organism, and therefore it needs to modulate that, and therefore the theory goes that silicon-based intelligence cannot be conscious. Like, I'm not sure if this is true, or this is just what I read somewhere. So these are all like things to think about.
Mm. I mean, I would say that perspective, haven't heard it before, but it would make sense that it's definitely offered, but it's a little bit reductionist, right? Like it's we reduce it to like, oh, it has to like look like a duck, quack like a duck, and then it's so and if it doesn't quack like an intelligent, so it's definitely not conscious at all. It's an interesting because it does actually lead to another question, like you know, will we end up dehumanizing it? Because for us, every consciousness would be a or conscious being that we would relate to would probably, I suspect, have to be humanoid at least. But it would also be pretty easy considering all these arguments are they're like, oh yeah, but it's artificial intelligence and it's artificial consciousness, so it's not real. Then we try to like skew consciousness a little bit. I mean, this must have been treated in some science fiction book, and then end up waging war on it because we dehumanize it fundamentally. Like, oh yeah, but it's so therefore
Mm.
we can enslave it technically. That's also where a lot of problems would come up.
Can we? Yeah, the question is, would we even be able to enslave it? Like, what does that even mean, right? Um,
Yeah,
like I don't know. Like that of course that is a possibility. It gets very sci-fi so fast, Like everything I want to think about is it's almost like a science fiction movie, and
yeah, it's crazy.
I'm really trying not to do that. I'm really trying to stick with what's actually happening right now. Um, but like any prediction you want to make, like it very fast goes into the realm of like, okay, world takeovers, or like or aligning it with God, all that kind of stuff. But like I think just right now, what I think is most interesting is the fact that it's now being hypothesized that GPT-5 will perhaps be AGI, so artificial general intelligence. um, Now this whole debate is like, okay, what is AGI? If you ask someone 10 years ago what AGI would be, they would say ChatGPT would already be AGI. Now we're kind of like, the frog boiling in the hot water, in the boiling, cooking in the boiling water, and we're just saying like, ChatGPT 4 is just another tool. It's not AGI at all. So are we just getting used to it? What does AGI even mean? Like, but then there's like the next step would be ASI, so artificial sentient intelligence. Is that even possible or not? The next few years are just going to be extremely interesting, and I'm definitely waiting to see what GPT-5 will look like. Um, what is your take on that, by the way? Like the whole AGI debate.
Um, I mean, you've already pointed it out. Like the it's a really fuzzy thing, right? Because what was previously AGI is now not AGI anymore. But it also, I think, points to a faulty definition. Like, can we give a fully just as like we can't really give a fully um, full definition of intelligence or consciousness? AGI might be a similar thing because I truly do believe that if I look at GPT, I am in the it's just a tool camp. Like, you know, it's as I said, it doesn't adapt its inherent structure to external stimuli over a long period of time. Like, you know what I mean? It's like now it does have memory that
Mhm.
they released in non-EU countries, which of course makes it quite interesting because it does, in some sense, adapt. Um, but not in the same fundamental way. So do I think like I think an important part of an intelligent thing is also that it independently evolves. Like we of course are dependent on our environment, so we need safety and food and stuff like this, and it needs electricity. But in a way right now it's still um we are its host, right? Like it's fully dependent on us as a
Mhm.
host. It's totally not autonomous. It's not actually evolving. So the thing that I'm missing, like if you were to put just the just kind of the reasoning capacity of GPT in a humanoid robot that would be able to sustain itself using, I don't know, solar power or whatever, then I would be much more tempted to
Mhm.
say, yeah, yeah, that's definitely general intelligence. Like it's fully autonomous,
Ooh.
it can adapt. But yeah, we're not there. It would not be super smart, maybe, because it couldn't do the same things we can. But yeah,
Okay, so for you, it has to be self-sustaining. So in a way, it has to sustain itself.
yeah. For me, I mean, again, I'm not an expert in the field. There are probably people that have a much more formal definition of what these things mean, and I'd be intrigued. Like, I'm going to look into this as a response to what we're discussing now because I realize I don't actually know.
Mm.
Um, but I do yeah, it needs to be able to self adapt, self evolve, and self sustain, and it's totally impossible now. Like the moment we pull the plug, it's done. Right? It's not fair.
Okay. And you also mentioned in the beginning it has no external stimuli. Is that also for you a prerequisite for it to be AGI or intelligent or?
Um, Not per se, because I mean, I do think we're far enough with multimodal intelligence. You know, it can already perceive things from images and audio. I mean, it can transcribe it. Like, you know, that is. I have conversations with GPT. I send it pictures to help me analyze something in it, and I have textual conversations with it. Um, Simply, actually, because we don't live in the same country. That's basically the same as what we do already, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah,
I'm
I
an
think we're there,
AI.
pretty much for me at least. Yeah. But you are fully self sustaining, right? Fully autonomous.
Ah, I don't know.
That goes
I,
deep.
I try to be. There goes very. Ooh. If you're not self-sustaining, you're not conscious or intelligent.
Yeah, dangerous territory.
Okay, no, but okay. So, but like I find this very interesting because um, you raise some good points. Like I am not, because like for me that stretches a bit. Like if you are self-sustaining, like so if the only difference is then that it can sustain itself and it wants to keep itself alive, let's say, then it would be AGIs. Then that still doesn't really, I think, addresses the subjective experience. Perhaps you could make an argument if something wants to stay alive, then it must have a subjective experience. I'm not sure about that. Um, okay, but
That is a
I see. I think where
very
you're coming from.
yeah, but that's a what you just mentioned. Actually, I realized a very interesting fundamental question, right? Like, would it be possible to have uh, a being, maybe let's take a humanoid robot for now, that is not conscious but only intelligent and still really wants to survive? Like, can
Mhm.
we make that an algorithmic,
Yeah,
optimization or not? Good question. I mean,
and so,
that's where it
oh, and
becomes
now I
scary.
think that, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's where it gets very scary. But now I think about it, like indeed, like this is. I'm not sure if that's possible. You are more into coding and building stuff. Um, but like,
I
if
think
I
we can.
understand you correctly, okay, but currently it's not possible. We cannot build something that keeps itself sustainable. Like that sounds like it's possible, right?
I'm not sure if we can build like continuing on the humanoid robot example, I don't think we could build a humanoid robot that really wants to sustain itself in that way. But I think we can already build like how do we call that? Like yeah, like still like coupled. ChatGPT is just running on servers. It's not really decoupled yet, but it's still coupled. we, that I think we might be able to create based on its inputs and just give it a general like if we build in a very strong optimization like it really just needs to optimize to its own survival and we have several indicators of that, then it should
Hmm.
technically predict whatever next move would satisfy those requirements. um, but it does become like then it becomes a huge ethical, because then you get like this really apocalyptic kind of machine, right? That just the equivalent of a paperclip maximizer, but then for its own survival kind of
Yeah,
thing. So
yeah, yeah. So basically, we have to program Darwinism into it. That's what you're saying.
uh well, I don't know if we have to, but I do think if you
No, no,
if
not
you
have to, but
mean
like, yeah.
yeah.
No, no, we don't have to, but like if you would do that, so if you would code or create some algorithm that instills, let's say, a maybe fear of death or fear of non-existing, so that it wants to, it wants to live, to exist. It wants to not die, basically. Then, by definition, it will try to survive. Then it will fetch resources in order to live. That could be perhaps the key component for intelligence, or for consciousness, whatever you want to phrase that.
So
Interesting.
now we are getting to the one of the real struggles that I have, that are the bigger worries that I have as well, and the reason I'm so keen on, over the course of my life, trying to add value in some way to the growth and power of the human intellect, is because if we have a, as you say, um, like an autonomous AGI that has like this Darwinian element, the only situation I think we would be safe in, um, is if we are actually still a threat to it, because in a game, like from a slightly game theoretical perspective, like imagine you are like way more intelligent than anyone else, but I'm talking about like let's say 10 times more intelligent, right? And you are also self-sustaining and you don't need anyone. It would you would probably need some level of enlightenment to still feel the need to be attached and connected to other human beings. Like for example, if I explore the reason I think that we are pack animals in a sense. So we can't survive if we're alone. Also because we grow up as babies and we get attachment and all of this. It's a very essential part of why we can continue living. I'm pretty worried that if we have this hyper intelligent, autonomous Darwinian thing out there that has absolutely no need to rely on us because it doesn't need us in any way, even though it's conscious
Mm.
maybe and it can, technically relate to us, there's no need for it to be friends with us because there's just no evolutionary advantage. So, you know, it really comes down to like, can we evolve quickly enough ourselves in some way to have like a true, instead of like this, just the plug, because that is something that it will just see as an existential threat, but just that our existence itself is necessary for it to survive, because we are either a force to be reckoned with, so therefore it just is in its own incentive to keep us as a friend, and therefore we create the bonds that we also see in our society that help us sustain, a future together. I just hope that that's something we can reach, because otherwise I think it's pretty bleak. Like it will be much more intelligent than us. If it's conscious, then I don't know what the how will it not subject us, right? Like how will we not be ants to an intelligence that just truly is completely self-reliant, or at least not dependent on us? That's where I get a little bit worried. um,
I see what you're saying, but I think that you can also turn it around. Like, perhaps it's way more benevolent to us if we're not a threat. So, like, we don't kill ants, right? Why not? Because ants are not a threat to us. So it's like, oh, nice, the ants, or like, oh, nice, some birds. But if they would be hyper intelligent ants, and they would also, want to be the dominant species, like we try to be on the planet, then all of a sudden it becomes a threat. Like Neanderthals were a threat, and they're gone, right? Because they were so close to us, and they were actually a threat. So if we are a threat to the AI, then it's more like, okay, let's get these fuckers out of here. While if it's just like 10x or 1000x more intelligent, and it just sees it as like, oh, oh, nice ants on this planet. It's like curious and fun to look at sometimes, but I've got more important things to do. Right? I got to explore space, or I got to colonize the entire universe with my AI offspring. I don't know.
that's true. That's definitely true. Like it wouldn't, like it would its mission wouldn't be to like exterminate us or like attack us. But if you look at how we treat ants, like, yeah, we don't intentionally go out and kill some ants. But at the same time, if I see an ant walking over my food, I will pick up the ant and probably squash it without even thinking about it. Or I will, if I will want to build a house, or I'm literally driving a car, I've killed thousands of ants already without even thinking about it. So I'm not sure I would like to be the ant in that equation.
Yeah, okay, but like in general, the ants are still. I'm not sure if this is true, but like I think for my argument, the ants are still, as a species, are still pretty safe. I think, right? So there might, okay, like a very minor percentage of ants gets squashed in car accidents. Okay, fine, but like to be an ant is not a really bad bet right now, right?
That's true. It's still pretty good survival rate. That's I mean, it does make sense. Like if it would have an objective that is, different enough. Like we just don't need to compete with ants in any way, and we're fine
Yeah.
not competing with them. Okay, sometimes we kill a few, but it is what it is. They have a pretty good life overall. We can imagine. Yeah, that's a future we could strive for, but I'm not sure if that's a future we could accept. But is that also the future you would want to strive for, as a human species?
That's again an entirely different question. I'm not sure
Yeah,
on this yet where I stand. Like I remember that last year you hosted this retreat in Croatia, and your friend Abel was there. And what
yeah,
he told me at the moment kind of shocked me, but he was just convinced that the AI would be unbeatable, and it would be inevitable. And he said just like, yeah, if you can't beat them, join them. And he was like, yeah, I'm gonna merge fully with them. And at the moment, I was, this is a year ago or something, I was still like, what, this, okay, this is quite dystopian. You have to merge with them and all that kind of stuff. But I started reading a bit more on transhumanism and all these things, and slowly I'm I'm turning a bit to that side more. Like, yeah, in a way, we're already kind of merging with technology.
yeah,
Where's the line, right? Where's the boundary? I think it's gonna be very fuzzy in a few decades or so to know what is a human still, because you probably can have some add-ons, and it's the right word, but some enhancements. Are you enhanced is now a thing, but like, yeah, it probably will become possible, technological speaking, to make some leaps in certain regards. Maybe sense
yeah,
perception, maybe longevity, maybe intelligence, all these things, right?
yeah,
So yeah.
definitely. I think I'm going to read up on that a little bit more because I've heard you about this more often. I think it would be a really cool thing to explore in the next chat because um, there raises a couple of big questions. I think it's going to be a whole episode on its own of like to what extent do you want and could you merge with artificial intelligence and other, I guess, eventually forms of life. It's an interesting perspective that I'm not sure. Yeah, I'll read up on it a little bit more. I think it would be interesting to dive into. Um, I don't know where I stand on that debate. I haven't really made up my mind. I'm merging without realizing it, I guess. So that means that by action, I'm already on the pro transhumanist side. But unfortunately, I don't have time to go into that whole topic today. But it also means that I can prepare a little bit more next time.
Yeah, cool. You gotta go.
Cool. I gotta go.
Okay.
All right. This was super
Th-
interesting. I think I'm gonna read the transcript a little bit and take some time to research some of the things that we've discussed. Um, I definitely would like to also bring up in a future chat um, some of the advancements, in terms of neural implants and stuff, because I think that's a really big topic as well in terms of like future of human intelligence. So maybe we can touch upon that topic also in a future chat.
yeah, sure. We can do whatever we want. I like the more shorter chats. Like, we should do more often again. It's good to do these check-ins.
Yeah, it's pretty easy as well to just zoom in on whatever is going on. Like every so many weeks, we'll release something new. Much more like we can't promise the best setup all the time, but we'll make it work.
Fuck it, let's do it. Okay, see you, bro.
All right, see you, man. Later.